my name is Elizabeth, and today I'm going to be doing my very first book review. And this book review is for my art therapy master's program. This was a book that was on our recommended reading list, and the list was sent out in the summer, and so I immediately went on Amazon and to bookstores to buy basically every book on the list because I was so nervous. And then I read most of them prior to starting the course, and I think one of this is the very important read prior, especially if your program offers an experimental art section where you make art as a group, not together, but make art and then you come together as a group and you discuss the work. It's funny though, because I read a majority of the recommended reading list before we started, and then I went into class and no one had read any of the recommended reading, and it was such a salt burn moment where I felt like Felix, because I was like, I thought we were supposed to. And I'm not that smart. It wasn't like I'm an intelligent human being. I just was really nervous that I wasn't prepared enough because I was a tattoo artist before going into my master's. So I just was worried I wasn't going to be as academic as some of the other people in the class. So more of an insecurity than an intelligence thing. But this book really did actually help. So that's why we're going to talk about it today. So in this book, I think the most important section, I would give it a 7 out of 10, actually. So I do think it's a good read. Highly recommend. It is on the pricier side, though, versus some of the other books, especially because it is a 1992 book. So it is a little bit aged compared to some of the other books that I've read or I would recommend. And so if you guys like this book review, I will add some more books that I would say are worth buying and maybe are not worth buying. If you want to go to your library or your school and you're just like, I'm just going to take the book out, where should I read? What's the most important part? I'm going to tell you. The most important part is dialogue and other methods. That was the most helpful section that I was able to apply into my experimental art classes, and really helped me not project onto people's images, not have questions that might have been harmful, and really prepared me to really know how to speak and act in a vulnerable setting. So part 2, section dialogue and other methods, he goes, what is it that we see? What are our perceptions differ and agree from what maybe the artist themselves has said? Okay, what do we overlook? What has they overlooked as well? We might begin by thinking about physical forms, textures, forms, colors, light, dark, edges, figures. Where does it go from here? Where does our eye go? What attracts us? What doesn't? And so these are questions you want to ask within yourself. This is not something that you're going to immediately project. Be like, my eye went here. Because that's not really helpful to the person that made the art. Because that's your perspective and you're projecting at that point. So it's good to say like, oh, this part of the painting you left empty. Is there a reason why? That is a much more constructive question because you're giving that person to be able to answer it, because then they can think about their piece in their way. It's also really important not to ask questions like, well, not really questions. I do hear people make statements and it always just, I'm like, I don't think that's the point, especially when I read theorists that believe, or, people that go more in a psychodynamic way. I think humanistic theory would definitely suggest projection a bit more, which I'm not a huge fan of. I wouldn't say 100% though. There are different types of humanistic theory, of course, but some of the stuff I read, they're like, oh, sometimes I give my opinion on a piece to help enlighten the client that may be looking at it in a more positive light. I personally don't agree with that method because I think you're taking away the agency of the piece, and maybe the person wants to sit in that discomfort and there isn't anything positive about it, and that's okay. Is in the responding. This kind of goes more into detail what I was just saying. So he says, I love the way he says this. Here's a list of things we definitely do not want to do. The sass, I love it. Okay, so he's like, when people are showing their art and telling the story of their soul, we do not talk about. He's like, don't you dare. And I love the energy. So he talks about not bringing outside sources in. And what this means is maybe that person made a piece this week, and last week they talked about their breakup, or before class they talked about their breakup, or at lunch. And then they're making this piece and they're discussing things. You're not going to go, oh, is this about your breakup? Because that's not what you should be doing. You should not be bringing in anything. You should let that person talk about whatever they want to talk about, because it might not be connected. It might be, but it might not. And for you to project or to make these assumptions or bring outside information into the piece is really taking away the agency of the artist and the creation. He goes on to say, we do not ask questions about how we can apply a better technical within the context. Do not ask questions about the value of the method. And so I think this was very interesting because I think as someone who did a bachelor's in fine art, I'm often torn to being self-critical of my work. I'm not really projecting it outward, but I definitely think like, oh, that line's not straight enough. Especially someone who was a tattoo artist, perfection is something that we aim for. And that was my last job. So when I do have that inner dialogue that's like, you're not good enough, you need to try harder and all these things. But it's interesting when I make this art, there definitely was a moment where I had to step back and be like, it's not about the final product, it is about the process. And I'm trying to communicate to myself through this work. And that's what I need to focus on. And I think that's really important, that we don't want to look at people's work when we're doing art therapy and being like, critiquing it. Like, oh, you drew a rose, but there's not enough a contrast. You should try a different type of red to like bring it out more. Like, you don't do that. That's not the point of it. And I think that's really important to take away. Yeah, so he basically says, we do not make suggestions about how the painter can improve the picture. And then the value of the dialogue, I like, it's so funny because I just like, important. And I'm not going to read all that to you. You should read it. But it was a good read. Obviously, I was like, this is it, man. This is it. I found this section really interesting because he talks about when it is labeled meaningless. It says, the line says, I'm just. Why do I have to have meaning? Why can't you accept me for what I am? I'm a simple and humble line, but I have feelings and I exist. I don't ask you what you mean. I thought this was really cute. So this artist that I recently was studying, he also said meaning is meaningless to me and I paint what I cannot name. Artwork as like photography of dreams. And so I thought that was really funny that this book kind of talks about how we as artists will be like, this doesn't mean anything, because we're not really ready to claim that. And I think that's really important to reflect on, is sometimes you can't pull things out of people because they're not ready, and that's okay, because that artwork, again, lots of notes in here that I think this book is just a really good read. I definitely think it prepared me what I should be saying, what I shouldn't be saying, and you know, I don't apply it all. I'm not always asking questions. So yeah, that's my first ever book review. I hope I didn't yap too much, but I hope you guys enjoy it. Highly recommend it if you're in a master's program. I'm gonna do some other book reviews because I find them interesting to talk about. And no one in my class is ready yet, so it's so frustrating. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and leave a comment if you want to ask about the book, or you have a suggestion, or you know another book that you say, hey, have you read this? I would love more suggestions. But yeah, okay. All right, thank you.